Not everyone is a scientist, but everyone is affected by science. From the medicines we take to the technologies we use every day, scientific research shapes our lives in countless ways. Making groundbreaking discoveries is essential, but there's one more piece to the puzzle. Being able to build trust, and above all, spread awareness will allow you to make even more of an impact. That's where effective science communication comes in. Our second series, Science for All, is about just that. This episode is not just for iGEM teams or scientists. It's for anyone looking to use a website to share a story with the world. Whether you're pitching a startup, advocating for a solution to a global challenge, or simply explaining why your work matters, the ability to communicate something clearly is just as important as the thing itself. First, let's talk about our Wiki and design team, who works on the website and who will be taking us through this series. Today, we'll be hearing from Max Swan, Anthony On, who's our current Wiki team lead, and Eugene Lee, last year's Wiki team lead. Now, here's Max and Eugene to tell us a bit more about what they do.
Hello, this is Eugene speaking. I think Wiki is like the painter for the team. We take all the amazing ideas and work that our Cornell iGEM team has done for a whole year and create a painting with them, and that painting being the project website.
Hi, I'm Max Swan. I'm a rising sophomore on the Wiki sub-team at Cornell iGEM. iGEM is a huge project that a lot of people put a lot of time and effort into. It's a culmination of 8 months of work, and so as a member of the Wiki sub-team, it's our responsibility to turn all of that hard work into a single web page that judges and other competitors and future scientists can look at and learn from. So our main goal is documenting everything that all the other sub-teams have done and putting it in an accessible format for anyone else to look at and learn from.
One of the most effective ways to communicate science is through storytelling. Behind every successful project is a story. There are challenges, discoveries, decisions, and people working together toward a goal. But telling a compelling story doesn't mean including every detail. In fact, good storytelling often depends on knowing all the details, while carefully choosing which ones matter most to your audience. The challenge is presenting information in a way that is engaging, understandable, and memorable without overwhelming the reader. A well-designed website can help accomplish exactly that. Let's hear from Max first to tell us a little bit more.
One of the main ways we do this is by separating out information into clearly defined pages. This not only helps convey the information more clearly, but it also makes it easier for people to access whatever information they're looking for. This is useful for the competition itself because when the judges are looking at our project, they want to see that we've hit certain boxes. And so if we can lay that out clearly on our wiki, then we can clearly convey that we have met their expectations and deserve a gold medal. This is also important for future teams because if they're interested in like one of the organisms that we worked with or one of the genes that we used, if our documentation is clear and concise and well formatted, then they can go exactly where they need to find that information, and that can help them improve their project in the future. Another big issue that I don't hear talked about a lot is the accessibility of your website for people with various disabilities. For example, colorblindness is relatively common, but it's not thought about that often when designing websites. For example, if you put like a really light blue text on a light yellow background, then people with protanopia won't be able to see it at all. And so then any information that you have on your website will just be inaccessible to them. Same with like red and green. If you try to make your graphs distinguish different data sets based on red and green, then people with red-green color blindness just can't see that. And so it's a really important thing to consider when designing a website that your information will be accessible to anyone who needs it. Similarly, images that are embedded into web pages don't get read by screen readers. So for people who are blind or have difficulties seeing, they won't be able to see your images, and their screen reader tools that they use in order to help increase accessibility on websites won't be able to help them with that. So one simple thing that you can do to increase accessibility so anyone can learn from your work is to include alt text in your HTML. It takes like 5 seconds per image, but it drastically improves the overall polish and effectiveness of your communication. Also, on a little behind the scenes point, alt text can be really helpful when you're debugging because it can show you where your picture would be showing up if your picture isn't loading correctly. So it's really just a win-win situation. And similarly, any accessibility settings that will help viewers will help you when designing a website because it can make it easier to look at and work with and realize where things are going wrong. There are many online tools that can check to see if the colors that you're using are accessible to people with various forms of color blindness or sight disabilities, and similarly, they can check to see if you're using large enough fonts so that anyone can clearly read the text and it doesn't get obscured on the background. Finally, while having a really interactive and engaging background for your website can be engaging for the audience, it can also be incredibly distracting from the information contained on there. I know one of the past wikis that I designed, we had a lot of designs and moving parts in the background, and we didn't realize until too late that it made it really hard to read the text in some areas. The main point of your website is to convey information, so that should always come first. It is important to have an engaging design, but if that gets in the way of conveying your information, then kind of lost the plot. So making sure that you're achieving your main goal of documenting your team's work and conveying that information clearly to judges and anyone else who might be reading it. That's the main point of Wiki, and that should really be the main focus as you're designing your website.
Those are some great general strategies which our Wiki and design team uses to guide them as they go along. Let's look at some more concrete examples of what we're talking about from Eugen.
So with any painting or any book, storytelling is really important, and that's the same for science communication. There's two ways I think we can do this. First is clearly structuring and organizing the information. Obviously, we worked on this project for a whole year, so we have a vast amount of information, and we want the judges or the audience being able to easily navigate the website and following our line of thoughts. To be able to do this, we first organize the information into different pages. For example, if you look at the website, we have a description page, we have an engineering page, we have a human practices page. And to navigate between these different pages, we have the horizontal nav bar on the top of the page. And it also has a drop down. For example, under specializations, there's education, entrepreneurship, hardware, modeling. This way, judges can follow our narrative. For example, let's say they look at our wet lab page and realize that the two model organisms we're working with, cyanobacteria and E. coli, have very different growing conditions. And because of that reason, our PD team or product development team decided to develop ARC or adaptive reactive chamber. Also, in addition to the horizontal nav bar at the top, if you look at each individual page, we have a side nav bar. In this case, in Prosper, we have it as a star and a rocket going through those stars, which is kind of cute. This is to be able to navigate within one page. I remember working on the human practices page for EntreX, and it was 115 pages of Google Doc. What I'm saying is there is a lot of information within one page too, even if we divided the information into different pages. To be able to easily navigate within one page, we have that side nav bar to easily jump to the section that you want to read. So that is the first part about clearly structuring and organizing the information. The second part is interactive design, where the audience can have a two-way communication with our website instead of it feeling like a one-way communication or information dump. Let's look at our Prosper website here. If you go to the hardware page, you can click through different versions of the ARC or adaptive reactive chamber, and also scroll through to see the animation of our ARC coming together, which is pretty fun. And in our human practices page, you can flip through the space ethics handbook just like you're flipping through a book. This way, audiences can interact with the website and have a more active engagement and active learning from the website instead of passively reading the information and receiving it. So that's two ways that I think makes a website really good. Thank you for listening.
Now we get into the nitty-gritty of it all. We all love websites, but few of us know what it takes to build one. Here's Anthony on to tell us about what really goes into the building of the website.
So it all kind of starts within the brainstorming process, right? So our team has a brainstorming process where we all present our project ideas, things like that. And within that, something that we've done really, really well is have different sub-team ideas for each project that we're presenting. And that includes Wiki. So that includes things like mascot design, logo design, kind of the general design that we want for our website and the general look of our project. That kind of establishes things like color palette off of immediate brainstorming. And sometimes even logos and mascots can also be decided then. But sometimes the logos and mascots, things like that, aren't set, or a project name changes, things like that. And that's actually the case of what happened this year, where our project name changed, we need a new logo, we need new mascots, things like that. So how do we kind of approach that? The first thing that we do is the Wiki team has all the members design a logo, design a mascot, and then those get presented to the entire team. From there, the entire team then gets a say in logos, what mascots they think fit the project best. But generally, I would say our color palette is established pretty early on within the project in the brainstorming process. From there, after our project has been decided, voted on, we know exactly what project we're working on. The Wiki team does these things called make wireframes. So wireframes are essentially just designs for our website. What do we want our website to look like in general? These aren't functioning pieces of code or website that we can actually put out, but rather designs, images, things like that. Where do we want specific things? What kinds of motifs, visual motifs do we want throughout our project website? What color palette do we want? By then, usually logo and mascot has been established. So how do we want to go about incorporating those into our website? These wireframes serve as the basis for our actual coding and our design later on. Once we actually do the coding and design, it is almost always based purely off of our wireframes that we make. So this is a huge part of actually making a really good website. Figma is the main tool that we use for creating these website layouts, website mockups, or wireframes for the entire project. And even within the Wiki team, we generally have two groups. We have designers and developers. So the designers generally are the ones who handle a lot of the things like logos, mascots, and these wireframes especially. That's a big part of what they're working on. From there, the developers, on the other hand, are what does a lot of the back-end work. These developers actually implement these wireframes that we have created. So a big part of it is coding. Historically, we've used HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, but recently this year, actually, we switched over to using React. So HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language, and this can be thought of as the structure for an entire website. So it's essentially the skeleton of our site, where it defines what's on the page, and it uses elements like headings, paragraphs, buttons, images, etc. And so without HTML, there is nothing to display. CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. So as the name says, it creates the style of the website. Think of it kind of as the interior design. It controls how things look. So that's colors or fonts or spacing, any layouts, things like that. So without CSS, all websites would pretty much just look like a plain text doc. And lastly, we have JavaScript, which is what constitutes the behavior. So it makes things interactive and dynamic. It's what allows any response to user actions. It fetches any data that's needed or updates any content. It's what turns this static page using HTML and CSS into something that's an actual application that's interactive with the user. So an analogy that I like to use is HTML, which is the structure, is almost like a skeleton for a human body. CSS is the clothing, right? It's the style or the appearance. And then JavaScript is like the brain or the muscles, where it's actually creating this sort of functionality and interactivity that makes the website so dynamic. So I mentioned earlier that this year we've switched over to using React. React is essentially just another JavaScript library that was created by Meta. So this doesn't mean that we're not using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. It just means that we're using a JavaScript library. The reason why we switched over to React this year is partially because we have a lot of returning Wiki members that already have some experience with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript that we felt that we could build upon that. On top of that, React kind of solves a big problem that JavaScript and HTML and CSS face. As we're creating an application that's larger and larger, managing a lot of changes to a page using just plain JavaScript can become very messy and a little bit hard to maintain. So a big advantage of React is a lot of it is what we call component-based, where essentially you can create these small reusable pieces. For example, whether that's a button or your navigation bar or something, and you can kind of compose that into an entire UI on the page. So changing one component will update it everywhere that it's used. This makes it a lot easier so that, instead of, let's say I have my navigation bar and I want to make a change, I don't have to go into every single page and change that one thing in the navigation bar, right? I just have this one component and it'll automatically update all of the other navigation bars. Another advantage is something that's called a declarative UI. Essentially, instead of manually telling the browser how to update the page step by step, we're basically describing what the UI should look like for a given state. And from there, React kind of handles the rest. This is just kind of for the sake of simplicity, where it just makes things a lot easier and smoother for our process. So basically, React doesn't actually replace HTML or CSS or JavaScript. It's basically built on top of all of these and just gives us a bit more of a smoother and easier or more organized way to use all of these together. So a big important part of our wireframes that we use in Figma is giving the project coherence throughout the website. When we design websites and make these websites, we don't want every page looking separate. We want it all to be a part of a holistic presentation. This makes it much easier for the user to actually follow and, just much more visually appealing. So as we go through our project website, this was recently added since these are our medals that we won in competition this year that we want to present. So initially this was our main landing page where we have Welcome to Mars, Cornell iGEM. As we scroll through, we have these certain visual motifs of, hey, we're in space, etc. This is the main thing of our project is it's a space project. And as we go through the different pages, you can still see that those visual motifs kind of stay. So while our website aims to be holistic and constant throughout, sometimes there are exceptions where, let's say, a specific subteam has a very, very specific vision as to how they want their page presented. From there, we can go about and work with that subteam and see how we can exactly accommodate what they want. So the only exception that we kind of had in terms of consistency throughout the website was the hardware page. So the subteam lead for the product development team had a very specific vision as to how he kind of wanted all the information presented. So as we scroll through, we can see all these very, very cool interactions and animations that bring this hardware page together. And these scroll animations are a really big part of what he kind of wanted to be implemented, right? So while it may seem like the Wiki team is just coding up a website, the process is much more than simply just coding something. It's a big process of actual design, iterations, voting, things like that kind of go into the process that make our website.
The special parts of the website and the heart are going to come from you, but I hope you took something away from this that will help you build your own website. We've come a long way from the early internet, so really, the sky's the limit with what you can do with websites. It's easy to think that the only important part of a project is the project itself, which is intuitive, I know. But to conclude with this episode, let's hear from Anthony one more time.
If we make a website that doesn't present our information well, then a lot of the work that is done for our team and by our team is actually kind of discredited, right? By presenting this information in a very clean and readable manner, we're making sure that everyone understands what we've done, how much work we've put in, and this documentation is very, very important.
If you enjoyed the episode and want to hear more, we encourage you to comment and ask us questions. We'd love to hear about the amazing work that you guys are doing. We're going to go deeper into the design and side projects aspect of the Wiki team. So if you're interested in that, make sure you like, follow, or subscribe. Until then, stay smart, and I'll see you geniuses soon.